Right, welcome to the Standards Committee, Gedling Borough Council. We still, there's two Conservatives haven't arrived as yet. No, they haven't given their apologies, so I assume they'll be late in some way. What I'll do, I'll take apologies for absence first, and then we'll just have a little run round, say who we are, and then we'll get the meeting started. So first of all, I'll say, is any apologies for absence, which all the ones we've got is Rosella Hawkes. Everybody else is present, so I assume that the other two will be coming in later on. If we could start with the officers to my right, if you just say what your position is. And yeah.
Kate Goodall, Democratic Services Officer.
Natalie Ossey, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
And I'm Francesca Wiley, Monitoring Officer.
Councillor Paul Feeney, I'm the chair of the committee.
John Bagley, I'm the independent person for the borough, but not a member of the committee per se.
David Brocklebank, Councillor and Vice Chair of the committee.
Andrew Elwood, Councillor for Phoenix Ward.
Councillor Towser Hinton, Councillor for Phoenix Ward.
Thank you for that. I'll take the rest. So we're on approval of correct records of the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of December. Now, the only person who was at the meeting isn't here as yet. If it does turn up.
Councillor Elwood.
Oh, Councillor Elwood. Oh, good.
I was there. There's only one thing you might want to change on the list of absentees. You're missing Councillor Payne. He did present apologies, but he's not listed as being absent from the meeting.
Right. Right, we've done that.
We'll make that change.
Any declaration of interests on any of the items on the agenda? We're quite happy with that. So the next one is recruitment of co-opted parish representatives. And I'll need Francesca to brief you on that one.
Thank you, Chair. At Gedling Council, the Standards Committee is comprised of members from each political party and two co-opted members. One is a civilian co-opted member, who is currently Rosalie Hawkes, who sent her apologies tonight, and the other member is a parish council representative co-opted onto the committee. Previously, this role was filled by Councillor Martin Thorpe. He is no longer a parish councillor and has therefore resigned from the position. As such, I'm seeking approval from the committee today to start a process of recruitment for the new co-opted parish member. In terms of how the process will run, we will contact the parish clerks with an application pack seeking interest from parish councillors to apply. I will then look at the applications and shortlist in consultation with the chair of committee, and then those shortlisted candidates, as has happened previously, will be interviewed by a panel of members drawn from this committee. At the conclusion of that, should we have a successful candidate, then it comes back to this committee to approve recommendation to full council for appointment, co-option, of that individual. So what I'm asking members to agree today is to approve the commencement of that recruitment process in the way that we have historically done it, and also to ask for a panel of interviewers to be established from this committee. We did have a previous panel, but some of those members are no longer on the committee, so it's to start afresh with a new panel. And again, to agree that the panel will select a suitable candidate and bring that back to committee to recommend co-option by full council. Thank you, Chair.
Is everybody clear about that? I'll vote for it.
Do we have?
Is there any need to? There's no need to.
Sorry, if we could have some volunteers for the panel, we'd need three members.
So I would volunteer. It's got to have a political bias, so I would volunteer for the Labour group. sign up or we'll...
If
So we
committee
have
are
a
happy for me
political
to contact them and ask for a volunteer outside this meeting, then if
Yeah.
members are happy to agree
Because
to
we
that.
need the political balance.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so that we're happy with that. So the next item is review. Oh, sorry, you do need to vote on it, right? Is everybody in favour?
Seconder as well.
The seconder is, yeah. Got a learning curve, yeah. Everybody who's for the motion? None against? Thank you. Right, that's all right. We'll move to the next item on the agenda, review of the Code of Conduct. We'll pass that over to Francesca again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is seeking approval from committee to establish a working group to review the Council's Member Code of Conduct, and also for members to agree a consultation on that review with the public, with stakeholders, with parish councils. Just to take you briefly through the report, so the Committee on Standards in Public Life produced a report in 2019 and suggested some best practice recommendations in relation to the standards regime within local authorities. One of those recommendations is that their code of conduct should be kept under regular review, annual review, and that there should be consultation with stakeholders as part of that review process. This council adopted those best practice recommendations in 2019, and one of the last review of the Code of Conduct that was undertaken was back in 2021, with a final adoption in November 2021 of the code. The decision actually taken at that time was that the Gedling Code was fit for purpose. It was taken and compared to the model code of conduct that was issued by the Local Government Association in response to the CSPL review. Now, at that point in time, the model code of conduct had not been published that long, and the guidance materials around it, although there were some, were certainly not as vast as they are now in terms of the guidance, the training, the support, the documentation that the LGA have produced to support their code. Similarly, in the sort of earlier days of that process, there were several authorities across the country and locally who didn't adopt the model code, and who, at that time, there were very few authorities that were actually taking up the opportunity to adopt it. As the guidance has increased and the training and resources from the LGA have increased, so has the take-up of the code, and certainly locally there are at least 2 local authorities that I've referenced in the report who have now adopted the model code of conduct. So in terms of kind of standards nationally and across, certainly locally as well, looking at how complaints about code of conduct are dealt with and the code against which they are measured, the CSPL was very much of the view that this should be standardised wherever possible, so where there's not huge disparity in areas as to, you know, what would amount to a breach in one area and what, you know, what doesn't in another area. Given the sort of, I suppose, growth in the adoption of the model code, and as part of our review process, I think that it's appropriate now for us to look at that again, and certainly as part of a consultation exercises to understand, is this something, particularly with the parishes as well, that they are interested in looking at and adopting. So last time we went through this process, we did have a working group drawn from committee, and it was a really sort of useful group, and there was some really good input into reviewing our own code, the model code, and how the two aligned. So again, I'm seeking authority from the committee to set up that working group again, and to sort of an earlier stage of the process, go out to parishes and go out, you know, to the public as to what do you think of Gedling Code, and what's your view of the model code, and try and sort of glean some wider views on that. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Has anybody got any questions or need any more clarification on that issue? Is everybody quite all right with that? Well, I will propose that we accept that. Have a seconder for that, please?
If I may, Chair, if we do have any volunteers, if perhaps they could.
Yeah.
I know, although Rosalie Hawkes is not here, she has expressed an interest on, if the committee are happy on being on that working group. She was certainly involved in the last time we reviewed the code, so she has expressed an interest. So I don't know if anyone else is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to propose we have the meeting and then ask for volunteers. Okay. So we have a vote on that? Yep. Right. So now we have the volunteers again, but we yet again should really have a political balance. So, as being the chair, I'll do it for the Labour group. And you same again, and then we'll have to see what happens with the Conservatives when somebody has a word with them. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 6, which is gifts and hospitality. And then again, Francesca will brief us on that situation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report that is brought into Standards Committee every year, and it's a review of gifts and hospitalities received by both officers and members for the previous financial year, so 2022-23. And it's just an overall summary of the volume of gift received compared to previous years, and whether there's any particular themes or issues evolving out of that review that may need addressing further. No huge areas for concern in 22-23, so there was a slight increase in the number of gifts received. There was a slight reduction in the offers of hospitality. In terms of the sort of general trend with gifts, it has been growing gradually since COVID. So during COVID, it dropped quite significantly because premises were closed, hospitality was not being offered, and there wasn't the same volume of interaction that there had been in previous years. It is starting to slowly, certainly in terms of offices, it's starting to slowly creep up again, although not quite back to where it was at pre-pandemic levels. As you can see in the report, generally there are no huge concerns in relation to gifts. They are being reported, they are being promptly authorised by managers. There was one incident that's referred to in the report where there was a gift that was considered to be of a slightly higher value. It was Amazon gift cards that were given to leisure staff inside of Christmas cards. So they weren't initially aware that they were gifts. The teams have been spoken to, and teams have been made aware again that all gifts and hospitality need to be recorded on the system, and then they can be signed off and authorised by managers. Just to let you know as well, as part of the review of the gifts and hospitality register this time, I have drafted some amendments to the code of practice for officers and members for gifts and hospitality. Now, because it's a dual code of practice that relates to officers and members, there's kind of a two-pronged approach in terms of approvals. So at the moment, the code of practice was taken to our Appointments and Conditions of Service Committee yesterday to launch consultation with the unions over changes that affect officers. Once that consultation has concluded, the element that relates to members will be brought to this committee. But as it's in consultation stage with the unions at this point, it's been through the ACSC process, but it will come to Standards Committee to look at it from a member's perspective once that consultation has concluded. But the purpose of this report is just to sort of update you as to the volume of gifts. In terms of members, again, nothing recorded this year in terms of gifts and hospitality. Again, we've seen a real sort of drop-off since the pandemic in terms of attendance at conferences and things being offered at those types of events. Members are reminded in councillor contacts to make sure that their register of interest is up to date and to make sure that gifts and hospitality are reported. And as I say, once the code of practice has been, if it is, subsequently the amendments are agreed, then we will be doing a bit more work with members and officers to kind of promote again the process for recording those.
Right, thank you. So is everybody clear about that? Does anybody want to speak on it? I think we'll do the same as last time, where we vote on it and then you need to have it.
Just to note the report.
Oh, just to note it. So I'll propose that. If somebody seconds it, please. And we vote on it. Whatever we are. Good. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair. So final report for this committee is just an update on the Code of Conduct complaints received by myself as the monitoring officer. So the last committee, Standards Committee, was the 15th of December 2022. And I was going to say members may recall, yes, members may recall, but at that meeting there was one outstanding complaint at that time. All others had been resolved. That complaint has been subsequently resolved, and the outcome of that complaint forms the exempt appendix to this report. And should members wish to discuss that in any detail, then we can, subject to approval, moved into closed session to do that. Since 15th of December, I've only had one code of conduct complaint that has come through. And that came through in April, and that is currently ongoing, but shortly to be determined, and the outcome of that will be reported to the next standards committee. So that's where we are in terms of complaints at the moment, a relatively low amount compared to the last few reports. So unless members have any specific questions on numbers, that's where we are. Thank you.
Has anybody got any questions on that? Are you all quite happy with that? Thank you. Any comments, John? You're quite...